Hello, brethren and guests, and welcome to the District 8 Freemasons of Washington Roundtable Discussion, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. It is important to note that our thoughts and opinions are our own and do not reflect those of the Grand Lodge of Washington, our respective craft, or any concordant bodies. All right, good evening. Welcome back to the District 8 Roundtable discussion this week. This week we have a very special guest. Once again, we have Worshipful Brother Andre DeWalt, and he will be talking about Masonic ethics versus morals. And with that, Andre, I will turn it over to you.
Screen and we'll go through the presentation there. So let me just bring that up. Come on. There we go. Okay, you should have the splash screen up there now. So as a way of introduction to this, let me first state that this isn't going to be like a complete survey of the whole topic of morals and ethics. This is more or less, as I was researching different things, certain thoughts came to mind, things I thought I'd like to share, and questions that I thought would come up that we might be able to discuss a little bit. As usual, with the type of presentations I like to give, I like to involve you guys and get your thoughts and ideas as well. On the questions that we ask, there will be no right or wrong answers. It's just what comes to your mind, what you think about, and sharing it with each other so we can kind of learn from each other as we go along. So with that said, the first thing I wanted to kind of approach is the idea of when did we get morals? When did morals start? We weren't born with morals. I mean, morals were developed over time as a need. And when I was researching this a little bit, I found some interesting ideas. So let's go to the first slide. Let's see if I can, why is that not moving? There we go. So to start off with, early man, prehistoric man, if you will, really was not obsessed with the idea of morals or good or bad behavior or anything like that. They were really kind of focused on survival. When they found that they were, as they observed nature and stuff, they started attaching mythological ideas to different events, lightning, thunder, storms, floods, and those became deities that they worshiped. They became mythological beings that they prayed to help get relief and to get more productivity or more safety or protect them in some way or another. And that was really the extent of their relationship. They didn't really relate a lot with each other. But as time goes on, we find mankind starting to develop civilizations and coming together in a congregational type form. And it was very amazing. And this, again, the thing I'm going to show you here now is it's believed by some historians. Some historians think it's not too accurate, but just a thought for you guys to consider, that after about the 600 BC mark, we start seeing a change. We start seeing, as cities grow and communities grow, there develops a need for kind of like principles of good and bad behavior and how we're going to relate with each other, how we're going to judge and cooperate and make things work. And we start to see a lot of philosophers starting to come into play. These gentlemen now have the opportunity to consider introspection, to consider where they are. And this particular wave of revised thought, if you will, was interesting in that it happened around that 600 to 300, 200 BC area, and they call that the axial age. This was a major transition for thought processes among humans, and how we look at each other, how we cooperate with each other. That particular moment in time had some very unique attributes to it. And we didn't see it again for quite a long time. The next time we had a real transition in how we interact with deity and how we interact with each other, and changes in rules and things didn't come about again until late in the 1500s, where we have the Age of Enlightenment. And we've all kind of studied that, but I don't think we really kind of got back to this axial age. So what were the features of the axial age? It was the beginning of really moral concepts, of moral behavior, of rules, of properties that we wanted to exhibit to demonstrate cooperation, helpfulness, respect, those kinds of things. At this particular time, there were great advances in religion, philosophy, science, democracy, forms of art, government. Everything was undergoing a real radical change in thought processes. We see at this time that it occurred all over the world and independently of each other. China had things developing, the Middle East had it, Europe had it, Africa had it. Every particular area of civilization was undergoing the same kind of change at about the same time, and not through any kind of communication with each other. But they were all developing this sense of a kind of morality. Spiritual foundations were changing. We were moving away from polytheistic and into monotheistic. And the idea that you don't have an instantaneous reward for something like a good crop for this year, but you're looking ahead at what happens after we pass. What is the end game, the long game, if, as it were, to religion and spiritual relationships. And that's where we see a lot of spiritual religions cropping up, new philosophies cropping up. Those things are still in play today. And in this time of social uproar, if you will, we see a whole lot of things happening. We move from a new kind of leadership, not the tribal chiefs so much anymore, but more spiritual leaders, the popes, the bishops, the deacons, the people that were the witch doctors, even some places, I guess. You know, the religious leader became really the significant leader, as opposed to the secular leader, the kings and chiefs and stuff. And as that evolves, we see through the Middle Ages, there's a lot of kings and spiritual leaders that are cooperatively leading from different, kind of like different aspects. We see that a lot, of course, towards the Middle Ages. So this became kind of the basis for the influential changes. The kinds of things that were changing were, as I said, the move to monotheism. We see that in Persia and also in Canaan with the development of Judaism and Zoroastrianism in Persia. We see Platonicism, or Plato, I can't say that word, Platonism. Essentially Plato, the rise of philosophers in Greece, and they became the focus of a lot of learning and change in how things were going. Plato spent a lot of time discussing government and how government should be run, and so that was a big change from how they were doing things before. We see the rise of the city-states in Greece and independent cooperation, more of a democracy-based or people-based ruling. We see Buddhism and Jainism in India, which again was a big major change in that area, became the focus of their civilization from that point on. Confucianism and Taoism in China. In the Far East, we see again a real move towards um, philosophical and development of ideas of good and bad. So why do you think these ideas develop at this particular time? That's my question to throw out for discussion right initially. Why do you think that that particular point in human history was such a pivotal point?
So, Andre, can we stop sharing your screen for a second so I can see all the faces? And
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, you can't see? Okay. I'm going to stop sharing there.
there we go.
There we go.
All right. So, as we usually do, if anybody has a comment, you can use the icon to raise your hand, or if you don't have the icon handy, just wave your hand and I'll try to get you. Go ahead, Scott.
So I'm believing that it probably has something to do with the agricultural renaissance, where we're actually allowing the plowing of the fields and the new methodologies in terms of how to retain water in the system, which I think helped stimulate the brain growth and such within these particular communities, and that kind of brings up like the Golden Crescent and how it's. I mean that started. I mean that area was highly motivated with this push to philosophy at that point. That's my belief.
Bud.
Okay, now am I on?
Yep.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, I concur with what Scott said, that the development of agriculture, the secularization of society, where the people now weren't scrounging from day to day to eat, and they had the ability to stop and think and to get different work to support each other rather than everybody doing everything from morning to dark, just trying to survive. But also there was a relative period of peace, and I hate to use that word, but there wasn't a lot of wars. Everybody kind of had their areas kicked out, and there was a time and a relaxation of pressure to where people had the ability to think. And as Scott said, we now had the better part of society based on agriculture, to where they didn't have to spend all day long scrambling to survive. It was just an opportune time at the moment.
Go ahead, Andre.
Well, I'd like to interject at this point. I agree with you guys on the agricultural part, but that was a big change. But it was also the coming together of different groups of people, and then specialization and trading services with one another. You now have to cooperate with people, and you want to deal, if you're a basically honest person, want a fair deal, you want to deal with another honest person. So you start to evaluate these traits in people. Is this guy honest? Is he fair? Is he going to give me a good deal? You know, is he going to help me out or not? So you start to apply those judgments to the people around you in the different trades, I think. And that's where I believe that the moral aspect of it starts to come into play.
All right, we had Jim Hamlin and then Mike Delaney, and I see Dale. So we'll do Jim.
Well, yeah, there's more time to sit back and think, but and think about what? Think about what Most Worshipful Sam kind of talked about. From day one, we needed the civility, the cooperation among the hunter-gatherers. And it was a direct, you knew who helped on the hunt and who didn't. Well, as civilization advanced, then we get to the specialization that Andre, I think, talked about. And you no longer know who's doing the right work. So we had to define perhaps what what we had learned from our hunter-gatherer years.
Dale. There you go.
Yeah, this was a time when class systems were starting. There were people were being classed as peasants, as publicans, as patricians, as you know, in the higher you went in the class, the more the people felt that they could had more leisure time, so they gathered together to speak out their mind and talk about philosophy.
Sam.
So, everyone has, in my personal opinion, I think we're just way too recent in our history. From the very point when the first creature knew that it was wrong morally to not kill, I think is the very beginning of when you began to have morality. Whether the gods willed it or not, when you took somebody else's life and you regretted it, then I'm thinking maybe that might be the very, very beginning. Organized, written morality has been around for thousands of years, long before we actually got civilized, in my opinion. Hand down.
Okay, shall we move on? We've got more.
So what was it like back then, Sam?
Wow. I just lost all my civility from last week.
Okay, Andre, you want to continue?
Okay, we'll get back. So at any rate, we see here that the morals are developing. Judgments, character traits are being observed and being ratified and being used in day-to-day transactions. So the next thing I want to kind of move into was, is man inherently good or bad? Now, Sam pointed out that he thinks everyone is basically a good person, I think. Didn't you, Sam? Is that kind of what you were saying? You don't have to answer. We'll get to you. At any rate, so the question is that I wanted to throw out there for you guys to think about is man inherently good or bad? Now, there's lots of schools of thought on this, even way back when. For the good side, you have philosophers like this Jean-Jacques Rousseau who are saying that people were always born good, instinctively concerned with the welfare of others. And there have been psychological or sociological experiments to show that even babies at birth tend to lean more towards helping people and people that help them than they do the other. So there's some scientific experiments that would maybe support that a little bit. Another one that would do this was John Locke, an English philosopher, who thought that they were, as you can see, the humans were inherently tolerant and reasonable, and though he had acknowledged the human's capacity for selfishness. So he knew that people had a little bit of selfishness in them, but basically they were reasonable and tolerant and getting along with each other. Now, on the other side of the coin, not everybody believed this way. In the Catholic Church, St. Augustine had the doctrine of original sin, which proclaimed that everybody was born in sin. You were inherently evil, and you were only saved through the divine power of, or divine intervention of Jesus Christ. And that's the only way you could have that sin erased. So in his idea, man was born sinful from the day he was born. Thomas Hobbes, who was an English philosopher, also argued that they were totally selfish and unwilling to cooperate with anyone unless it was through the constraint of civil contract law. Unless you pass laws that said you can't behave this way, then people were going to go crazy with being inherently evil. So again, and then of course this splits down the middle. There's a lot of different philosophers on either side of this issue. So my question to you guys, and I think a lot of us feel that mankind is inherently good. And we say in Masonry, we only accept good men and try to make them better. So if mankind is inherently good, should we as Masons just start accepting everybody who applies to the fraternity with the idea that they're good men? Everybody's a good man. Every man is a good man until you prove them otherwise. So why don't we just take everybody? I'll open it up again, Steve.
Okay. Jim Hamlin.
What came to mind was Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where at the bottom of the pyramid is safety, and until the physical needs, the safety is satisfied, you can't advance. And perhaps this ties into your previous question too. Why did we advance? As we advance through that hierarchy, where we move from satisfying our safety to our self-actualization, we make choices whether to stay at that base level, hand-to-mouth feeding, where we need to be self-centered, or else we die, to that higher level where perhaps more altruism happens.
And I believe if you believe that everybody is inherently good, that's probably true. But by the time they get to the point where they are applying for Masonry, I think we've seen that just because they may have been inherently good at birth doesn't mean they are when they apply to be a Mason.
Even though we seem to believe that mankind is inherently good at birth or inherently good by nature, something must happen over time, because not everybody's good who applies to Masonry. We know that. There's not everybody in Masonry is good. We've had members kicked out because of things they've done that weren't good, as it were. So something must go wrong somewhere. Either they weren't inherently good to start with, or somehow they got deviated along the way.
Michael.
I believe that all men, everyone, every human being is born inherently good. It's that we are born into a realm that is a negative realm, and so it gets diluted. That inheritance of good gets diluted over time. I mean, for me, I always believe that the closest a person ever is to God is when they're born. And so as they grow in this world tries to distract them from that goodness that they have within them. And so I think with Masonry, we accept men that know of good, but we do not accept men that have been distracted from what really good is. And so I think not everyone could or should be a Mason. Not every man could or should be a Mason, because they would take the greatness of it and the benefits of Freemasonry and use it for selfish gain. and therefore becoming more of I would say imitators. And unfortunately, I've met some folks like that, but because they are Masons, I give them the benefit of the doubt because they are inherently good. And so I will do my best to bring that good out, to let that good resurface in them. I've met a lot of dark people in my journey, and have been able to help to bring that goodness and resurface it in their lives. Thank you.
Bud.
Well, very well said, Michael.
Bud?
Okay, now can you hear? Yeah, now I'm on.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
God. I'll learn this yet. Is not Masonry also evolving along these lines? I mean, when I joined, I got an hour interview at my parents' home because I just turned 21 and with the lodge members. And then as time went by, we realized that wasn't enough. And then we started going and having them come to attend dinners or such and see a little bit more. Now we've got the 6-step program. I think Masonry is evolving along these lines, not so much to select people, but to have people understand what we are doing and what we offer to make a better selection. So that, I know that's kind of sideways on the question, but we are doing something to address the issue that's there to make sure that the people come in and want to be there. So.
Okay.
All right, that's it for the hands right now, Andre.
All righty, go back. Okay, so now I get into another interesting topic. We're going to deviate a little bit and go into, if I can make this work again. There we go. Ethics versus morals. This is an interesting topic for me. I found this to be very fascinating, and I'll see what you guys think. In a lot of the readings I was doing, it's saying it's possible for someone to be totally ethical and yet at the same time be totally immoral. And I found that to be kind of a shocker, contradiction in terms, as it were. But then we started looking into the definitions of these things, and I can see where that would happen. In the traditional definition, ethics are rules of conduct that are put in place by a societal group, some particular culture group that defines how they wanted things done within their group. Those are ethics. Lawyers have ethics. The medical profession has ethics. We know that a lawyer will defend a client even though he knows he's totally guilty, and the moral thing here is if you're guilty, you should be found guilty. But the ethics of judicial process say that he deserves a full, dedicated defense, even though the person who's defending him may know he's guilty. So that may go against your moral idea, and yet it's still within your ethical structure. So by difference, morals are things that we know internally, things that we have learned over time internally that are good versus bad. They're your own set of principles and ideals that you're going to use to govern yourself and to judge others. So you have this conflict sometimes between the two. So when we say someone is ethical, we don't always necessarily mean they're moral in the true sense of the word. Or if they're moral, it doesn't necessarily mean they're ethical. So ethics are essentially external constructs. They're outside of your internal self, whereas morals are internalized beliefs that have been formed by your experiences and your learning. So why would you want to use one over the other? What's the motivation for that? Well, one of the primary motivations in ethics is because society says it's the right thing to do. If you're a doctor and you're told that you have to heal that person, even though you know it's probably better if they were to pass away, maybe they're fourth stage cancer and in a coma and they're never going to come out of it, and you think, well, maybe the proper thing to do would be to let them die of a natural cause because I'm artificially keeping them alive, but your ethics say you cannot allow the person to die. Same thing with a lawyer who says, I know this person is guilty, but I'm going to defend them to the best that I can because my profession says I have to give the best defense possible. So why would you use morals then? Because that's what we believe in. That's our right or wrong. That's our general compass, our internal compass by which we're going to live our lives, judge other people, associate with other people. That's our moral compass. So we say in Masonry, Freemasonry is a peculiar system of morality veiled in allegory and illustrated by symbols. Why don't we just say Freemasonry is a system of ethics or ethical morality, or why do we say morality? Why is that? Why is it a system of morals?
Because it's more about the right or wrong than it is. I can't put it into words. Mike, go ahead. Delaney.
Morality being more of an entire human concept over the whole world, but ethical behavior is due to your own local culture, customs, and laws.
Bud, let me unmute you. I'll do it so you don't have to. Well, maybe not. It's not working.
Okay, it should
There
be
you go.
now.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to answer this off my personal experience because my mother and I fought over this for half a century.
Oh, God.
And with all due respect to my mother, okay, but we had this long. When I worked at Boeing, groups that went by ethics and lived by the guidelines that they set for themselves disappeared. They got non-funded. When I worked for Douglas Aircraft, groups that went off on their own and ran by ethics ended up in trouble and got non-funded. When I worked for John Deere, it was a different structure. The people that were moral didn't get recognized as easily, but in the long run, they were well rewarded, and John Deere worked hard to keep the groups from being there. In my own life and on my own time, the people that I've seen that have lived by morality and kept to it, stuck to it, rather than trying to play the legalism of ethics, are the people that lasted, that survived, and were the happiest in the long term, not a happiness and laughter, but a happiness and satisfaction.
All right. We got Scott Ross and then we got Michael Burton. Go ahead, Scott.
Sure. So at this point in time, we all know that with Masonry, this is an internal journey that we are taking. As you said, Andre, morals are based on your internal beliefs. So the idea is that Masonry guides you in an internal journey to help sculpt what your own compass, basically. So we don't really deal with ethics because, again, that's an external force that's always pressing against you. Your idea is how you are able to point your own self. So that's kind of the reason why I think we make it as a moral activity.
I think that's exactly right. And I'm glad you brought that point up. I think that that's where we really need to focus as Masons, is building our own internal compass, making sure that we understand what is right and what is wrong, and then allow us to adapt to the ethical environments as we have the need to. Good answer. I like that.
And thank you, Scott, for pulling those words out of my mouth.
As
I'm here
Michael
for you.
Burton.
that was.
Michael, go ahead. Let me unmute you here. There you go.
All right. Now, it's a great question and absolutely great answers. And then I want to point on what Scott was saying as well is that it is an internal journey. And as Masons, how do we meet, act, and part, and to be on a level? Now, ethically, I'm not on the same level as someone else is, but morally, I'm on the level with everyone I come in contact with, and it creates a better way to walk with mankind. Not everyone has the same ethics, but someone with morals, they will. There's a spiritual level of morality that is something I really appreciate. Even seeing it put into words in Freemasonry, just to what I was always feeling in my life and looking for direction. Once I became a Freemason, I seen the words and it started making more sense to me. Morally, before I talk too much, I'm gonna stop right there because I'm gonna start getting tongue-tied too. But it's an internal journey, and to be able to walk and talk to any man, to be able to travel anywhere and walk without fear because you're surrounded by other men with morals. It's a great feeling, and it's a great way to live.
All right, I got Jim Hamlin, and then we'll do Sam next.
A thought came to mind. Well, yeah, we're about our morals, but our obligations, our ethics, because that's the external part of it. Just throwing that out there, because we do have our guidelines beyond our basic morality.
Yeah, if I may interject here, Jim, and in the research I was doing, some of the writings compared, they said, of course, we're a system of morality. We're trying to build our morals and learn our morals and make sure we have those iron locked into us. But the ethics in Masonry are the landmarks, the things that we have said, these are the things Masons will do. That's our rule book. And some of them are based in those morals, some are not, some are just, but that's basically where the ethics come in.
Sam.
Jim Hamlin, you're just super, man. I really appreciate it. So if Freemasonry is a symbol, having to do with a system of morality, isn't that really given to us by Freemasonry? I mean, over the last several hundred years. So our morality is not ingrained. We don't bring it with us. We bring our ethics with us and adopt the morals of the fraternity. Now, ethical behavior has some leeway in it, except for Freemasons who go beyond and sort of mingle their ethics with their morality so that they're almost inseparable. I mean, if your morals, personal morals that you adopted via Freemasonry of knowing what's right and what's wrong, then the tenets that you were talking about, the landmarks that you were mentioning, Andre, kind of inherently come right along with it, doesn't it? Hand down.
Bud.
Okay, so to carry this definition forward, if we have morality and we set standards to ethics, are we not defining points along the line and creating a point where we stop? I'm very strongly in favor of free choice of morality and respecting what other people have. I don't want to define it into an ethic, into a level layer or a plateau because when you set a plateau, that's the highest that most people aspire to. And I think that morality is more important in that we keep evolving with it. I'm not disagreeing with people. I just feel that we should be very careful when we use that term ethics.
John's waving his hand.
If you take my mute off, I'd be happy to give my 2 cents worth.
Well, you've said enough. That's good.
No, everybody has ethics. It's just to what degree they are. It's just like everybody has morals. What degree is that? So it's how we conduct ourselves as we go through life. And the idea is if you have strong ethics, that means you're reaching for your pinnacle of achievement. Same with morality.
I would tend to want to disagree with that, John. I think that not everybody has the same level of ethics, because ethics are rules. That's the rule book. And some
they have them, but it's how they use them.
Well, some might have a more abbreviated version of rules than others. That's what I'm saying. Ethics can, we could have, in some jurisdictions, you may have 10 of the landmarks. Say, those are our rules. Those are our ethics. In another jurisdiction, you may have 28 that baculate out and say, those are our rules of ethics. Some even add more to it, make it 45 or 50 landmarks that are the rules. So those vary. I think those vary a lot depending on how you want to structure your organization to follow the rules. But it doesn't change your morals.
I hear you, but
integrity.
Andre,
Yeah, sorry.
I hear you talk about our landmarks and everything, and what it always kind of took me back is that the Grand Lodge of Washington has never established their landmark.
That's right.
But we do have landmarks that we live by. You don't have to write them out, and it's the same thing as where your ethics lie, where your rules are, and your morals. Different people have different ideas about what's right and what's wrong. We got prisons full of people that think they did right.
I don't know. Are morals subject to a degree? I mean, can I believe in honesty to a different degree than you believe in honesty? Is honesty universal, or is it strictly up to the individual and how they want to base it?
Well, I think you can look at religions the same way.
We're not talking religion here.
I know. I'm just saying, you cut across the board. Everybody's individuals, and they have their own set of ethics and morals. Some are, in my eyes, are high. Others think they're high, but they're low. This is where you're standing and looking at what's going on.
Any other thoughts?
I'm sitting here talking on mute. Jeez. So you have, John, you mentioned that, you have prisons that are full of people who have varying degrees of morals and ethics or whatever. But I would argue we don't have lodges that have those varying degrees of morals.
But we do, but Steve, we do have people in those lodges that do have problems with ethics and morals.
But we don't have lodges full of them.
I hope not.
Michael, go ahead. There you go.
Right. Yes. I think as far as I'll always lean toward the spiritual. I think because being ethical is more of an outward experience. Ethics are dictated by the outside world and what is determined to be right and wrong for particular things. Where morality being an internal your internal journey and part of fulfilling your purpose for being. It's some things that they say are ethical, or to me are very unethical. You know, I mean, there's some things happening in this country right now that they say is absolutely right. Where from where I sit at, it's absolutely not right. Okay, so that's why I appreciate Freemasonry being based on morality and not on ethics, not on letting the society dictate how it is that we act, but where our internal compass dictates how we move forward. Morality is such a, for me, in my opinion, morality is such being a moral person opens the doors to so many more things than someone else saying this. Am I being unethical or am I being ethical? Who's to determine that? Whereas being moral is something that you feel within yourself, that you're born with, you're inherently born with. Ethic, that's a very tricky word, and there's some very unethical things being done by people that, you know, that are setting the terms for what ethics is. That's all I
got. Jim.
Thank you, Michael, and for your comment also in chat. That was well said. We tend to think of morality as absolute and even basic ethics, but you go through the history of mankind, and morality has changed. Did Brutus, when he was stabbing Caesar, think I'm doing something wrong? Or I've been doing genealogy and looking at census from the 1800s, and what popped to mind was slavery. Slavery was believed to be ethical and moral at that time. So does morality evolve?
All right, Andre.
That's it. Okay. Okay. So that wraps up the topics I wanted to try to discuss. I hope it just, if nothing else, it just gave you something to think about, something to maybe ponder on. I wanted to close out with this quote I found, which I think applies very well to our idea of being moral within Masonry. Good man is the man who, no matter how morally unworthy he has been, is moving to become better. And I think that's where we all are, is no matter what degree we are morally within ourselves, and we all know where we are, we're in this to do it better and to learn how to use those morals to better our life. With that, I just want to say thank you, guys. I appreciate your listening. That's all, folks. And that ends my deal.
All right. Thank you, Andre. That was a wonderful topic. I got you, John. Hold on. So at this point of the evening, usually what I do is I tell you about the next couple of weeks in case somebody has to drop off before we get done. So next week, same time, same place, we will be doing the Sultan Monroe will be hosting the virtual roast of the Grand Master. 7 o'clock next Thursday. have your significant other with you, bring your dinner, bring something to toast with. And if you have any funny stories or anything about our Grand Master, bring those with you as well. The week after that, I am planning on doing something along the lines of technology and masonry. What has this these Zoom meetings and the COVID-19 shelter in place, how has that helped us or hurt us as far as using technology in masonry? That's all I have for now. If anybody has a topic for May 21st, let me know and we can set something up. And with that, I will open the discussion back up. Go ahead, John. Let me unmute you.
Yes.
There you go.
I'd just like to have a commercial break here. Once again, we are starting the Master Craftsman series for those of you that are Master Masons who'd like to find out the history and esoterica of Freemasonry. And we're going to have a meet and greet meeting. We had one last Sunday. We're going to have another one on the 10th. If you're interested, shoot me your name and I'll send you the email that gives you the meeting. It's a Zoom meeting, so you can dial in, and we have a speaker that's going to talk. He's going to once again repeat his talk on early Freemasonry and how things came about. So, Jim Hamlin, did you catch that? I expect to see you there again. Other than that, brethren, I think there's a lot of good, important stuff learned tonight, and I'm glad, even though I was late, that I tapped in. Thank you.
It's good to have you, John. Thanks for joining us. So, you know, it's funny, Andre, when you first started talking about ethics versus moral and a person being ethical but immoral at the same time, one of the first things that came to my mind was all of the controversy, I guess you could say, or all of the media attention of Dr. Kevorkian, because that was, to me, an argument of morality versus ethics. Whether you help somebody end their quality of life because they have no quality of life, or you force them to continue on. You know, that's a morals versus ethics.
And that's a giant ethical question. There's a lot of ethical questions like that. And that's why I say they are ethical, because you can apply your morals to them, good or bad, and help you to make a decision whether that particular rule is good or bad. But the basics of good and bad are the morals, I think.
Anybody else? All right. Well, again, Andre, I want to thank you very much. And everybody that joined us, I want to thank you very much. We will go ahead and end the recording, and we can stay on and continue to BS if you guys want. And thank you all again, and have a good night.